All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're going to talk about these powerful, almost invisible forces that basically shape everything about us, our beliefs, our values, and yeah, our entire perception of reality. And to really get it, we have to start with one big question.
And that question is this: why do we just assume that everyone sees the world exactly like we do? I mean, really think about it. We all kind of do it, right? We think our way is the way. Well, that's the core puzzle we're going to try and unpack today.
So to really wrap our heads around this, let's kick things off with a story. It's a simple little tale, but man, it does an amazing job of showing how two people can stare at the exact same thing and see two completely different realities.
Okay, so picture this scene. A scholar from a faraway land shows up in this old Anatolian town. He's on a mission. He wants to talk to the wisest person they've got. So who do the locals bring out? The one and only Nesruddin Hoja. But here's the kicker. They can't speak a single word of the same language.
So what do? They have this entire conversation just using hand gestures and drawing pictures in the sand. The scholar draws a perfect circle. Hoja, in response, draws a line right through the middle, splitting it. The scholar then divides it up again, pointing to the different sections. Hoja sees this and makes a big swirling motion with his hand. And the whole town is gathered around, just totally captivated, trying to figure out what's going on.
Okay, so after it's all over, their friends rush up to them asking, "So, what did you talk about?" And this is where it gets good. The scholar is absolutely buzzing. He's convinced he just had this profound philosophical debate about the nature of the universe. He thinks Hoja is a genius. But Hoja, what does he say? He tells his friends, "That guy has incredible taste. He just gave me his secret recipe for the most amazing baklava."
And look, it's a great story, right? But it's so much more than that. It gets at something really deep. We all walk around with these cultural blueprints in our heads, these worldviews, and we just automatically assume everyone else has the same one. What this story shows so perfectly is that what you think you're saying, well, it might not be what the other person is hearing at all.
So that begs the question, how on earth do we end up with such different ways of seeing things? Well, it's because from the moment we're born, we're being trained by the world around us. Let's actually take a look at the blueprint for how that training happens.
This whole process has a name. It's called socialization. And it's not something that happens for a little while. It's a lifelong training program. It dictates pretty much everything about us. Yeah, it's the obvious stuff like the food we like or the clothes we wear, but it goes so much deeper. It shapes our hopes, our biggest fears, even our dreams. It's basically the operating system for our reality.
A great way to think about this is the classic iceberg metaphor. What you see above the water, the food, the music, the language, that's just the tiny tip. The real power, the massive chunk of ice that can sink a ship, is what's hidden below the surface. That's where you find all the invisible stuff, the unspoken rules, the core beliefs, the worldviews that are actually steering us through life, and half the time we don't even know it.
And here's a crucial point. This whole socialization thing isn't some neutral, fair process. Nope. Our culture also sorts us, puts us into a kind of hierarchy. This is called social stratification. And it's not just about status or labels. This ranking has real-world consequences. It affects our access to resources, and it totally shapes the kind of training we get.
But wait, it gets even more complex. Because none of us belong to just one single group, right? Our identities are made up of all these different layers, and those layers overlap in really important ways.
And this is where a really important idea comes in: intersectionality. It's a bit of a mouthful, but the concept is pretty straightforward. It just means that all those different parts of your identity, your race, your class, your gender, all of it, they don't exist in separate little boxes. They all intersect, they overlap, and they create a totally unique experience. So the experience of a black woman isn't just the black experience plus the woman experience, it's its own unique thing.
Here's a perfect example: Oprah Winfrey. By any measure, she's one of the wealthiest, most powerful people on the planet. That's a position of dominance, right? But when she steps outside the studio, her identity as a black woman intersects with that wealth, and she's talked about having trouble hailing a cab. That's an experience that a white person with her level of wealth would probably never even have to think about. That's intersectionality in action.
So, you might be wondering, where do all these powerful social rules even come from? Well, a lot of the time, they're hiding in plain sight. They're baked right into the tools we use every single day, like language itself.
Just check out some of these phrases. We say them all the time, right? We don't even think about it. But sold down the river? That's not just some metaphor for betrayal. It comes directly from the absolutely horrific practice of selling enslaved people down the Mississippi River.
Or rule of thumb? Yikes. That comes from an old law that literally allowed a man to beat his wife with a stick as long as it wasn't thicker than his thumb. It's kind of mind-blowing when you realize language is like this living museum, carrying all the good, the bad, and the ugly of our history right inside of it.
Okay, so this brings us to our last big idea for today. And this one can be a little tough to swallow. If something as basic as our language is shaped by culture, then what about our knowledge? What about all those objective facts we learned in school?
Well, the truth is, a lot of what we think of as pure objective knowledge is also socially constructed. The facts we're taught as universal truths often just reflect the point of view and serve the interests of the dominant culture that's teaching them.
And nothing shows this better than this. Seriously, look at this. On the left, you've got the world map we all saw in our classrooms, the Mercator map. See how Greenland looks massive? Almost as big as Africa. And notice what's right in the middle, looking big and important? North America and Europe. But now, look at the map on the right. That's the actual size of the continents. Africa is so enormous you could fit the United States, China, and India inside it with room to spare. Greenland is tiny in comparison. The way we've been taught to see the world is literally distorted to make Western countries look bigger and more central.
It really all boils down to this. Your view of the world, literally and figuratively, depends completely on where you're standing.
So I'll leave you with a question to chew on. What's one truth in your life, something you think is just obvious, that might look totally different if you were standing in someone else's shoes? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me.
Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, let's jump straight in with a question. It sounds simple, maybe, but it's actually pretty deep. How much of what you believe is natural is actually something you were well taught? Think about it for a second. Your everyday view of the world, history, cultural stuff, even just simple norms, it's all shaped by forces we barely even notice.
Yeah, things we rarely question.
Exactly. And this deep dive, it's all about socialization. That's the lifelong process, often invisible, where we learn how to interact, how to see the world within our own culture.
It's about how our families, friends, schools, the media, how they all teach us, often without us realizing, what's normal, what's right, what counts as true.
So our mission today, we want to give you some tools to critically look at these beliefs you hold, understand where your own views come from.
And maybe appreciate just how different social positions can lead to really, really different ways of seeing the same world.
Get ready for some aha moments, maybe. Things that might make you rethink stuff you've always just accepted. Okay, let's unpack this.
And just a fair warning, some of this might make you feel a bit uncomfortable.
That's often a sign you're on to something important, though.
Right. That's exactly when you need to lean in and really question things.
And that's critical thinking, isn't it? It's not about just, rejecting information. It's about asking where it came from. What's its purpose? What are the hidden assumptions?
Yeah.
Not just taking things at face value.
Even from sources that seem totally authoritative, like textbooks.
Especially then, sometimes, yeah.
Okay, so to really show how deep this goes, let's start with this great parable. It's about Nezred and Hodja and a foreign scholar.
Oh, I love this one. It's brilliant.
So, picture this. This foreign scholar, he arrives in town with his whole entourage, right? Asks to meet the smartest person around. Naturally, the townspeople call for Hodja.
But there's a catch.
Yeah, the catch is they don't speak the same language at all. So they decide to communicate using signs. Everyone's gathered around, watching.
The foreigner starts. He draws a big circle in the sand. Hodja then takes the stick, divides it right down the middle, 2 halves. Then the foreigner draws another line, cutting across Hodja's line. Now it's in quarters. He points to 3 of the quarters, then the last one.
Okay, setting up a contrast.
Right. Hodja responds by making this swirling motion with the stick over all 4 parts.
Interesting.
Then the foreigner cups his hands, palms up, wiggles his fingers. Hodja mirrors him, but palms down, wiggling his fingers. And that's it. Meeting over.
And the interpretations are just completely different worlds.
Totally. So the foreigner's people ask him, what did you talk about? And he's impressed. He says, Hodja's brilliant. I showed him the earth is round. He showed me the equator splits it. I indicated 3/4 water, 1/4 land. He showed me the undercurrents and winds.
Right, a geographical discussion.
I showed him water evaporates, goes up. He showed it cools and comes down as rain. A whole scientific dialogue. Haja tells the townsfolk something else entirely. He says, the stranger has excellent taste. He wanted a huge tray of baklava.
Baklava, okay.
I said, sorry, you can only have half. He then showed the syrup recipe, 3 parts sugar, 1 part honey.
Right, the quarters.
I agreed, said it all needs mixing well. That was the swirling motion. He suggested cooking it on a hot fire, palms up, and I added we should sprinkle nuts on top, palms down.
It's perfect. It shows everything, doesn't it?
It really does. 3 key things. 1, we all have a worldview based on our culture. 2, we just assume others see things the same way.
Yeah, we project our own reality.
And 3, what you mean to say isn't always what the other person hears or understands. Their lenses are different.
Completely different.
Now imagine, what if that scholar wasn't just a scholar? What if he was an invader?
Oh, right. That changes everything.
Haja and his people, they'd be forced to assimilate, learn the invader's language, their rules. Their own culture gets pushed aside, maybe lost. Survival means conforming.
And generations later.
Haja's descendants might still feel that loss, that anger. But the invader's descendants, they weren't the ones who did the invading. They might just not get it. They might say, why are you still angry? Just get over it.
Because their whole understanding of history, of themselves, is built on that dominant culture's narrative. It explains so much about historical conflict and cultural misunderstanding.
It really does, and how these perspectives get locked in, which brings us to deconstructing the so-called facts.
Yeah, like the whole Columbus discovered the Earth was round thing.
Right. We're taught that, but it's just not quite right, is it?
Not at all. So many civilizations knew the Earth was spherical way before Columbus. Ancient Greeks, sure, but also Muslim astronomers, early Christian thinkers, scholars in ancient India.
And indigenous peoples in the Americas, the Maya, Aztec, Inca, they had sophisticated astronomical knowledge.
Absolutely. They understood it long before Europeans arrived.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. Why are we taught the European version, that Columbus discovered America?
Well, who benefits from that story?
Exactly. It wasn't like the Americas were just empty waiting to be found, right? People were already here.
Of course. Millions of people. So calling it a discovery erases their existence, their history. It frames the narrative from a purely European viewpoint.
It's a political act then, constructing knowledge.
It often is.
Yeah.
Dominant cultures tend to create narratives that maintain their position, that justify the existing social order, the hierarchy.
Which highlights the difference between just having an opinion and actually engaging in critical thinking.
Big difference. Opinions can be based on anything common sense, what you saw on TV, what feels right, often no real research behind them.
And we live in a society that pushes individualism, right? Like, all opinions are equally valid.
Yeah, that idea is definitely out there. But critical thinking is different. It means you have to actually wrestle with the issues, dig deeper, look beyond the surface.
And back it up.
Back it up with research, with evidence, with informed arguments. It's about moving from just believing something to actually understanding it on a deeper level.
Okay, so let's talk more about how pervasive this socialization thing really is. It's everywhere, unavoidable, shaping us without us even noticing most of the time. How deep does it actually go?
Oh, it permeates everything. Let me give you 4 statements. These come from a lot of social science research, and they might challenge some common beliefs. Ready?
Okay, weigh them on us.
1. Research consistently shows that white people in many societies receive messages, often subtly, that they are more important or valuable than people of color.
Okay.
2, people from middle and upper class backgrounds generally have an easier pathway into universities and better paying jobs compared to those from working class or poor backgrounds.
Right, access to resources, networks.
Exactly. 3, when white men enter fields typically dominated by women, they often get promoted to leadership positions faster than the women in those fields, the glass escalator effect.
Okay.
And 4, heterosexual individuals publicize their sexuality constantly in countless everyday ways, holding hands, wedding rings, talking about spouses, without it usually being remarked upon or seen as flaunting it.
Whereas other orientations doing the same might be viewed differently.
Precisely. Now, hearing these, some people might immediately think, no way, I'm not racist or I'm not sexist, I treat everyone the same.
Yeah, that's a common reaction.
But here's the critical point. These statements aren't about individual feelings or intentions. They're based on documented patterns, on systemic outcomes found in extensive research.
So my personal belief that I'm fair doesn't change the broader cultural patterns.
It doesn't negate your participation in a culture where these systems exist. We all internalize so much of our culture. We absorb these biases and norms, often unconsciously. We just see it as the way things are. Natural.
It's like that iceberg metaphor, right?
Exactly like the iceberg. You see the tip, the obvious cultural stuff, food, clothes, language.
Holidays.
Yeah. But the huge part, the dangerous part, is underwater. It's the hidden rules, the unspoken assumptions, the deep-seated values.
Do you only really notice them when someone breaks a rule or when you bump into a totally different culture?
That's when the hidden parts become visible. And socialization dictates almost everything within that hidden part. How we dress for certain occasions, how we talk to elders versus peers, even our hopes and dreams.
Even what our parents expect from us.
Absolutely. Their expectations are shaped by their socialization, by the norms and values they absorbed about success, family, gender roles, everything.
And within all this, there's social stratification.
Yes. Society isn't flat. It's layered, hierarchical. Some groups are valued more, given more status, more resources.
And where you are in that hierarchy shapes how you're socialized and what you have access to.
Definitely. Those higher ups get more access to wealth, opportunities, power. Those lower down, less. And we often call these lower valued groups minoritized groups.
Why minoritized instead of minority?
Good question. Minority can imply it's about numbers, but it's not always. Minoritized emphasizes that it's an active process. These groups are made disadvantaged, given fewer resources, and society often creates rationalizations for why they deserve less. Think about ethnicity, income level, disability, gender, age.
So it's about power dynamics, not just population size.
Exactly. And think about nonconformity, even on a small scale. What happens if you break one of those deeply ingrained social rules? Like, say you wear shorts and a t-shirt to a formal job interview.
Yeah, you probably won't get the job. You'd be seen as unprofessional, disrespectful, maybe.
Right. You risk your status as a normal member of society in that context with real consequences. So much of this is just internalized. It doesn't feel like a choice.
Who does the socializing? We mentioned family, peers.
Those are key agents. Family, peers, education, media. But they're all interconnected. Your family is also socialized by the media and education system and so on. It's not just a straight line.
And from day one, we're put into groups, right? We learn who we are by learning who we're not.
That's Charles Cooley's idea of the looking glass self. We kind of see ourselves reflected in how others react to us, how they categorize us.
Even though Western culture really pushes this idea of the rugged individual.
Our group memberships, race, class, gender, age, etc., have a huge influence. We can often make pretty accurate guesses about your tastes in clothes, music, food, just based on those group affiliations.
Which leads perfectly into intersectionality.
Yes, a really crucial concept developed significantly by scholars like Patricia Hill Collins, building on earlier work. The idea is that our different group memberships, race, class, gender, sexuality, religion, ability, nationality, education level, they don't exist in isolation.
They overlap.
They intersect, they overlap, and they combine to create unique experiences. Experiences of both privilege and oppression, dominance and subordination.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Think about being a mother. In the context of your family, that role might be highly valued, right? Status, importance.
Yeah, generally.
But in a professional workplace context, especially for women, that same status, being a mother, might actually become a disadvantage.
Yeah.
Assumptions about commitment, availability.
Right, so the value of that status changes depending on the situation.
Exactly. So what does this mean for you, the listener? It means your identity isn't just one thing. It's this complex mix of all these different roles and statuses you hold, and you're constantly navigating how they interact.
You can be dominant in one situation and subordinate in another?
Absolutely. Imagine a high-powered CEO. Dominant role at work, huge status.
Okay.
But then maybe they decide to go back to school for another degree. They walk into a classroom. Suddenly, the professor holds the authority. The CEO is now in a subordinate role as a student.
Or a professor who's an expert in their field, totally dominant in the lecture hall.
Right. But then they go to the beach, and a rip current starts pulling them out. Suddenly, the teenage lifeguard is the one with the power, the knowledge, the authority in that specific situation. Our position shifts constantly.
The Oprah Winfrey example really drives this home, too.
It's a powerful illustration. Here's one of the most influential, wealthiest Black women globally. Immense status in media, business, culture.
Unquestionably.
Yet, as the source material notes, when she steps outside that specific context, say, trying to hail a cab on a city street, she might still face racial discrimination, be treated like any other black person by someone who doesn't recognize her or who holds prejudice. Her immense status in one realm doesn't erase her membership in a minoritized racial group in another context.
It really shows that matrix of domination, how these things constantly shift and interact. Or think about a company CEO who, upon retirement, moves into an elderly care home. Their status dramatically shifts again.
Precisely. It's a constant flux based on context and roles.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly and talk about social institutions. These aren't physical buildings necessarily, but more like abstract ideas, big concepts.
Yeah, they're established and enduring patterns of social relationships. Huge, powerful forces in society that shape our behavior, our expectations. Think about law, religion, the economy, education.
Family.
Family, yes. And language. They sort of force us, often subtly, to conform to societal norms.
Language as a social institution, how does that work?
Well, language provides this incredibly complex set of rules, norms, values. It shapes how we think, how we categorize the world, often without us even realizing it. It transmits culture.
It carries hidden meanings, like the 4th of July example.
Perfect example of what sociologists call symbolic interactionism. The meaning isn't inherent in the date. It's created through shared symbols and interactions.
Right. If I say 4th of July to someone outside the U.S., it's just July 4th, another day.
Maybe they know it's a date. That's it.
But for Americans, that phrase instantly triggers a whole cluster of images, smells, feelings, values.
Fireworks, flags, barbecues.
Freedom, liberty, patriotism, all these things you've been taught through socialization to associate with that specific symbol, that date. Society reinforces it every year.
And language itself, the words we use, can carry these hidden histories, these embedded social meanings. Sometimes they're quite dark when you dig into them.
Yeah, this part is really eye-opening. Some common words or phrases have pretty surprising, often racist or sexist origins that most people have no idea about.
It's true, like the peanut gallery.
I think most people just think it means like hecklers or unimportant critics.
But its origin is from the cheap seats in old theaters, often where black patrons were segregated and sometimes subjected to ridicule.
Wow. Or using the word gyp.
Comes directly from gypsy, a derogatory term for the Romani people, based on harmful stereotypes about dishonesty.
And even things that sound completely harmless, like eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
The original version of that children's rhyme used a racial slur in the second line. It's shocking when you learn the history.
Or phrases like sold down the river.
Directly references the horrific practice during slavery of selling enslaved people south, often separating families, to harsher conditions on plantations along the lower Mississippi River.
And there are others too, right? Like no can do or long time no see.
Both originated as ways of mocking the broken English of Chinese immigrants and Native Americans, respectively. They embed prejudice right into everyday speech.
It's not just race either. Lots of words for women seem to have degraded over time.
Definitely. Words like mistress originally just meant the female head of a household, equivalent to master. Hussy just meant housewife. Madam was a term of respect. Governess, spinster, courtesan, wench, tart. Many started as neutral or even positive terms describing a woman's role or status, but evolved to become derogatory or imply immorality.
So language itself reflects and reinforces changing social views, particularly about women's roles and sexuality.
It's a powerful mechanism for social control, often hidden in plain sight.
And maybe the most chilling one is rule of thumb. We use it all the time to mean a general guideline.
But its likely origin, though debated by some historians, is often linked to Old English common law, specifically a ruling supposedly made by a judge named Sir Francis Buller.
The one that said
that a man was legally permitted to beat his wife, provided the stick he used was no thicker than his thumb. It ties a common idiom directly to the historical acceptance of domestic violence.
It really makes you stop and think about the words we use without thinking.
Absolutely. And these examples show why having a theoretical framework is so important for understanding society.
How so?
Well, theory is like a lens. It shapes how you look at a problem, what you see is important, and therefore what kinds of solutions seem logical.
Give me an example.
Okay. Imagine a friend consistently shows up to school or work without lunch.
Okay.
If your theoretical lens focuses on individual choice and health, you might assume they're dieting, or maybe just forgetful. Your solution: offer diet tips or remind them to pack a lunch.
Right. Individual level.
But if your lens focuses on systemic issues like poverty and food insecurity, you might theorize they can't afford lunch. Your solution then becomes completely different, maybe connecting them with resources like a food pantry or a school lunch program.
So the theory dictates the intervention.
Exactly. Some collectivist societies, like Finland or Japan, take a systemic approach. They provide free or heavily subsidized school meals for all children, regardless of income. This removes the stigma and addresses potential inequality directly. Different theory, different solution.
And this loops back to that core idea we started with. Knowledge isn't neutral, it's socially constructed.
Precisely. It's built from specific historical moments, cultural viewpoints, ideological stances. It can make you question things you thought were solid facts.
Like the World War II example.
Yeah, that's a great one. If you're educated in the United States, you're generally taught that America's entry into the war, D-Day, the atomic bombs, that's what won the war in Europe and the Pacific.
That's the standard narrative, pretty much.
But if you're educated in Britain, the narrative is often different. They emphasize their endurance, standing alone against Nazism for years before the U.S. fully entered the war in Europe. They might see the U.S. contribution as important, yes, but not the sole reason for Allied victory. Maybe Lend-Lease was more critical earlier on.
So different national perspectives, different truths about the same event.
And these narratives have political consequences, right? They shape how populations view their own country's importance, how they view other countries. They can fuel nationalism or resentment.
So what does this all mean? It means knowledge isn't purely objective.
It's rarely, if ever, purely objective. It comes from somewhere. It's produced under specific conditions, often reflecting the perspectives of those in power historically. That's often been Western, white, male perspectives.
Knowledge isn't just one thing, then.
No. Scholars talk about different types of knowledge. There's personal knowledge from your family and community norms, stories, taboos. There's popular knowledge from media, what an ideal family looks like, who gets portrayed as dangerous.
Then there's school knowledge.
Right, the official curriculum, often state-sanctioned, where questioning can sometimes be penalized. And mainstream academic knowledge, the concepts taught at universities, often presented as objective truth, the established canon.
But there's another kind.
Yes, transformative academic knowledge. This is the research and theory that actively challenges the mainstream canon, that questions those objective truths, and explicitly links knowledge production to social hierarchies and power structures. Being aware of these different types helps you evaluate information more critically.
Okay, so given that knowledge is constructed and often reflects power, how have different thinkers tried to explain the inequalities that result from these social structures?
Well, many theorists have tackled this. Karl Marx famously focused on the economic structure, your relationship to the means of production. Are you an owner, bourgeoisie, or a worker, proletariat? He saw this as the fundamental source of inequality and conflict.
But it's not just about money, right?
Max Weber agreed economics was crucial, but he added other dimensions. He talked about status or prestige, social honor and power, the ability to exert your will even against resistance. Think about, say, a university professor versus a highly paid fashion model. The professor might have less income, but more social prestige in certain circles. Weber added complexity.
And others built on this.
Yes. Gerhard Lenski looked at societal development, arguing that as societies become more complex and produce more surplus wealth, inequality tends to increase because resources are finite and groups compete for them.
And Patricia Hill Collins, who we mentioned.
Her work on intersectionality and the matrix of domination is key for understanding how these different factors, race, class, gender, etc., interlock to shape an individual's position and experience within that hierarchy.
So the common thread is?
The common thread in all these theories is that your position within these social structures, particularly if you belong to a minoritized group, significantly impacts your access to society's valued resources, wealth, income, property, but also less tangible things like prestige and power. It's systemic.
It really brings us full circle. Our perception of reality, what seems natural or true, is fundamentally shaped by where we sit in this social hierarchy.
It dictates not just what we can get, but how we see. Our entire worldview is filtered through that position.
And sometimes the things that shape that view are incredibly subtle, almost invisible, like the world map.
The Mercator projection, yes.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Most of us grew up seeing that map in classrooms, right? It's the standard world map.
It is. Very common.
But it massively distorts sizes, especially away from the equator. It makes Greenland look almost as big as Africa.
When in reality, Africa is about 14 times larger than Greenland.
And it makes Europe and North America look much bigger relative to South America and Africa than they actually are. Africa could fit the US, China, India, Japan, and most of Europe inside it.
It's a huge distortion. And it's not accidental. The Mercator projection was useful for navigation because it preserves angles locally.
But its widespread use in classrooms and media.
It has political and ethnocentric implications. By visually centering and enlarging Europe and North America, it subtly reinforces a Western-centric worldview, a sense of Western dominance and importance.
It's a passive image that just seeps into our subconscious, shaping how we literally picture the world and the relative importance of different regions.
Exactly. And it makes it that much harder to genuinely understand a perspective from a vastly different place in that hierarchy, or from a culture shaped by a different map of the world, literally and figuratively.
It's tough, isn't it? I mean, I was socialized here in England, and honestly, part of me instinctively feels it's the best place to live, even though I've never lived anywhere else for comparison. That's just my ingrained bias.
It's a common feeling.
I know.
And it's hard work to truly step into someone else's shoes. Imagine someone from a very low-income background attending a lavish, formal dinner party at a mansion. The unspoken rules, the assumptions, the sheer difference in experience, it would be incredibly alienating, potentially.
Or the example you gave earlier, Westerners looking at, say, women's roles in Saudi Arabia.
Right. We might impose our values, freedom, individual choice, our specific ideas of equality, and wonder, why don't they just revolt? Or why do they accept this?
Instead of trying to understand their reality from their perspective.
From within their cultural context, their religious framework, their social structures, which might prioritize family honor, community cohesion, or different interpretations of piety over Western individualism. It requires stepping outside our own ingrained assumptions.
It reminds me of C. Wright Mills and his concept of the sociological imagination.
Yes, that ability to see the connection between our personal troubles and broader public issues, between our individual lives and the larger historical and social forces that shape them.
It's about realizing your own biography is interwoven with history and social structure.
And developing that imagination is crucial, but it's difficult precisely because our socialization is so deep. It's hard to separate what we've learned to see as natural from the actual social structures that created that reality.
Wow. Okay, so that brings us towards the end of this deep dive. We've really covered a lot of ground.
We have.
The core idea seems to be that our reality, what feels natural and true, is actually this incredibly complex social construct. It's built layer by layer through socialization, through social stratification, through the institutions like language that surround us.
We've peeled back some of those layers today, hopefully revealing how much of our perception is shaped by forces we often don't even see.
And uncovered some insights that maybe challenge some deeply held beliefs about the world and our place in it.
And that questioning, that critical thinking is so important. It's not about finding easy answers, but about continuing to ask better questions. It's vital for growth, not just as a student exploring these ideas, but just as a person navigating the world.
To better understand ourselves and others.
Exactly.
So the final thought for you, our listener, after this deep dive, after looking beneath the surface, what's one belief you hold, something that feels natural or just the way things are, that you might start to question first?
What will you challenge now?
We really hope this conversation has sparked some curiosity. Keep digging, keep asking those questions, stay curious.
Oh, well.